Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. So, what's the deal with the flying spaghetti monster? Here he is. There's the flying spaghetti monster right there. Uh, the flying spaghetti monster is a sartorial pseudo deity created in like 2005. And the point of it was to attack intelligent design being taught in the public schools of Kansas. So a protester came up with this creature as his argument for why intelligent design shouldn't be taught. And what this creature is it's supposedly a invisible, undetectable deity that created the universe. It's made of pasta and meatballs. Its appendages are made of pasta. Its body's made of meatballs. And its followers are called Pastafarians, and they comprise the original Pastafarians were pirates. So the point of this was to somehow show that the choice of which creator you argue is responsible for the creation of the universe is an arbitrary one. It can be anything you want it to be, including the alleged flying spaghetti monster. Now everybody knows this is fake, but they were just trying to make a point that the creator, the Christian creator, is an arbitrary creator, and it could just as easily be. You can make the same arguments for the flying spaghetti monster. And that you say, well, no, the flying spaghetti monster is the one who created the universe. And if you're going to teach intelligent design and that God created the universe in our schools, well, you should give equal time to the flying spaghetti monster, because it's just as plausible that the unseen, undetectable flying spaghetti monster was also the creator. And this satirical argument is really just trying to say that because you can't prove God with science, that makes God arbitrary, and therefore shouldn't be taught in schools, because you could just as easily say the flying spaghetti monster is responsible for the creation of the universe, because the science can't prove either the flying spaghetti monster or God. So why is it going to be God instead of the flying spaghetti monster? So that's the point of this whole thing. Now, even though the flying spaghetti monster is meant to be comical and humorous, its underlying assertion is very serious. It's claiming that God is arbitrary. Christians just happen to select God among other deities, and it's an arbitrary decision. So because of that arbitrariness, and because you can't prove God's existence with science, then it shouldn't be taught in schools. Now, that assertion is fundamentally incorrect. So the flying spaghetti monster doesn't actually prove anything. They think it does, but it doesn't. And I'll explain to you why it doesn't. Now, if you watch my prior videos about God, then a lot of what I'm going to say should be shouldn't be new to you. Um, the flying spaghetti monster is made of spaghetti meatballs. That means the flying spaghetti monster is a material being. He, being created of matter, the FSM for sure, must be a created being. Spaghetti is made of atoms and molecules, and meatballs are made of atoms and molecules, and that's material reality. So the FSM is a material deity. God, the Judeo-Christian God, is not a material being. The Judeo-Christian God is an uncaused being. So there's a huge difference between the flying spaghetti monster and God. The flying spaghetti monster is a material being. God is not a material being. God is immaterial. That means God is not caused. So God is uncaused. But because the flying spaghetti monster is a material being, the flying spaghetti monster must be caused. So right there's a huge difference between God and the flying spaghetti monster. And it's, those people who believe in the flying spaghetti monster simply don't understand the Judeo-Christian God and who that really is. They don't understand this difference between the two. And this is a huge difference. A caused being, even a supposed God, if it's a caused being and it's made of material parts, well, something had to cause it. Because all things material are caused, whether you call them deities or not. So the flying spaghetti monster will have to have its own cause, which means it can't be the ultimate God because something caused it. So there has to be something greater than the flying spaghetti monster. So flying spaghetti monster has got its own God. So there's got to be a God greater than the flying spaghetti monster. So the flying spaghetti monster isn't even what he claims to be. The ultimate creator of the universe, because he's got his own God, because he's created. So he's already a liar. The Judeo-Christian God, on the other hand, is uncaused. God is not made of material parts. God is actus purus, pure act. God acts on everything else, but nothing acts upon God. Therefore, God does not have his own God, because he's uncaused, he's uncreated. There's nothing that created God. And this is also why God is immaterial and invisible, because he's uncaused, meaning he's not made of matter. The flying spaghetti monster, on the other hand, claims to be invisible and undetectable, but that's another lie by the flying spaghetti monster. Another lie! Because being a caused God, he must be material. And if he's material, he must be detectable and visible. Because everything that is material is detectable and visible. Now, I'm using the term visible to mean, every way you can possibly detect it. There are some things that, in certain light waves, you can't see them, but you can detect them other ways. Black holes are invisible, but they're there because of the gravitational influence that they have on the surrounding stars. So they're detectable, not visible in the strict sense of being able to see it. You can see maybe the glow of the surrounding stars around the black hole. In fact, you can, because there was just a picture of a black hole released last week, and that's exactly what it showed. But visible, I use that a little loosely, but detectable definitely. So the flying spaghetti monster, because he's material, must be detectable. So this guy's just lying left and right. He's a liar. The flying spaghetti monster is a liar. All right. So the thing with the flying spaghetti monster is he's really no different than any of the pagan gods, like Zeus, the Greek pantheon of gods, Athena, Mercury. Those gods were gods, but they were also material. You could detect them, see them. They were in human form. That's a material being. And if it's a material being, it's caused. And if it's caused, it cannot be God. Plain and simple. So the flying spaghetti monster, the argument really does apply to pagan gods. Your choice of which pagan god is the creator of material reality is arbitrary. So the flying spaghetti monster argument would work against pagan gods. That's true. Why Zeus instead of the flying spaghetti monster? That's a legitimate argument. But God, the Judeo-Christian God, is not a pagan God. The Judeo-Christian God is very, very different than Zeus or Athena or Mercury or the flying spaghetti monster. God is uncaused. The flying spaghetti monster and the pagan gods are all caused. They all suffer from this problem here. So you gotta understand that the Judeo-Christian God is very, very different than pagan gods or the flying spaghetti monster or the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus or whatever it is you want to call God. Very different. These are created beings. This is an uncaused state of being. Very different. God is a metaphysical being that solves a physical problem, which is what decides what is made real and what is not made real out of the infinite possibilities for material reality. That's what God is. Flying spaghetti monster can't be that because he's caused. Can't be deciding, what exists in reality, material reality, because he's part of material reality. So, God has other attributes like omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, right? And you can only get these attributes if you have the power to create material reality. But to do that, you have to be uncaused. The flying spaghetti monster, because he's a material being, he's created. Something created it. Consequently, he cannot have these powers. These are only reserved to God, the uncaused immaterial God. God is also singular. There's only one God. And he's a mystery. God has to be singular because God can't create another God. Because God is uncaused. God cannot create that which is uncaused because the uncaused things cannot be created. Not only that, if there was more than one God, there was two gods. They could each undo the other. So neither would be a supreme power. So that sort of system of two gods doesn't work. It's got to be one God. And God's a mystery because God's power to create material reality it simply is. It's not something made of parts that you can analyze and figure out. So it's mysterious. It simply is. Now, the big complaint is, well, you can't prove the flying spaghetti monster isn't there with science. And since your choice of God is arbitrary, then the flying spaghetti monster is as good as any of your gods. Well, that presumes that science should be capable of detecting and proving the existence of God. Well, that's not true. Science has limits. This is true. Science has limits. It's got limits. Science is the study of material reality. So you're using the scientific method to study material reality. God is not material. So there's no one for science to study God. God, the main reason that there has to be a God is because something has to tell material reality what to be. Something has to start it. Material reality could be anything, but something has to tell it what it should be out of the infinite number of possibilities. And I have a video that explains all this. Because God is there to create material reality, then God is outside of material reality, and has to be, because God can't be created by the thing that he creates, material reality. So that would essentially be creating himself. If God creates material reality creates God, then God created himself. Well, that's impossible. So material reality, science can only study material reality. It cannot study God or the metaphysical, that which is beyond physical reality. That's a limitation of science. Science simply cannot test for the metaphysical, which nonetheless must be real. That's a limitation on science. That's not a proof that God doesn't exist. See, that's another assumption that the flying spaghetti monster, the Pastafarians, are making, which is that science should be able to answer everything, address every possible question, give you an answer to everything. That's not true. There are limits to science. Science cannot tell you about the causes for material reality. Cannot tell you what caused time to begin. And I say this, I explain this in other videos. Because time must begin, the cause of material reality has to be outside of time. So anything that you can think of that's subject to time can't be the cause of material reality, can't be the creator of the universe. So anything subject to time cannot be the responsible thing for creating the universe. So that excludes anything that's material. So that excludes, randomness, chaos, because those are all based on material realities. Anything made of matter cannot be the cause of the universe. Flying spaghetti monster, made of matter, material being. Sorry, can't be the cause of the universe. And neither can the pagan gods, because they're material. They have special powers, but they're material, which means they're subject to time, which means they cannot be the cause for the existence of the universe or the creation of material reality. So the Pastafarians have simply not understood what the Judeo-Christian God really is. They don't understand the cosmological arguments for God's existence. The argument of prime mover and first cause, first brought to us by the Greek philosopher Aristotle. They apparently didn't go to philosophy class. They don't understand. They haven't learned this yet, I guess. The flying spaghetti monster is not a valid objection to the existence of the Judeo-Christian God. It's simply not. It's false. It's a false argument. against God. It's a good argument against pagan gods, Zeus, Athena, any sort of created pagan deity. Oh yeah, it's a good argument against that, but not against the Judeo-Christian God. Not the God with these attributes. You know, if you're going to, turn this argument around and say, well, no, the flying spaghetti monster has all these attributes. Okay. Well, then, if the flying spaghetti monster has all these attributes, you're really talking about semantics. It's really just a question of, well, what are you going to call this uncaused being? You could call this uncaused being God. There's no rule that says you have to call this uncaused being God. If you want to call it the flying spaghetti monster, you could do that, but it would be a misnomer because the uncaused being that we're talking about doesn't have spaghetti and meatballs as components. In fact, it doesn't have any material components. But that's just an issue of semantics. That doesn't prove that God isn't real. That's a semantics argument. You don't have to use the word God, G-O-D, to describe this uncaused being. You can use other words. In Islam they call this being Allah. It's a different spelling, but it's referring to the same being. So semantic arguments that doesn't prove that God doesn't exist. And the flying spaghetti monster is not given these characteristics, by the way. I'm just making it hypothetical that if you did that, what would happen? And what would happen is you're just describing the same uncaused being that Judeo-Christians are, but you're not describing this thing, which you previously described the flying spaghetti monster as. Another hypothetical, if you want to try and turn this into an argument against Jesus Christ as both fully man and fully God, and say, well, Jesus Christ is an arbitrary God, therefore the flying spaghetti monster will work just as well. Well, Jesus has things going for it that the flying spaghetti monster does not. In terms of evidence, Jesus has a lot more evidence for being who he says he was, which is the Son of God and fully man, than the flying spaghetti monster. Now you got to understand, in Catholicism, Jesus is considered the Son of God, whereas the uncaused creator of material reality is referred to as God the Father. And then there's also a third entity called the Holy Spirit, which is essentially a helper to Christians, the Spirit of God. But Jesus is considered God, fully man and God. But Jesus has a lot more evidence going for him that he's God than flying spaghetti monster does. Jesus has the Word. And the Word is what Jesus actually says contained in the Gospels of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if you read the Word, you'll You'll discover that it's a work of genius, unparalleled genius. Um, if God was going to write something, this is the best candidate for something God would have written. It's the greatest written work of all time. It's a masterstroke of absolute genius, beyond compare. And it also proves that a genius must have existed in order for this great work to exist. So it also, the existence of the Word also proves that this Jesus did in fact exist, because otherwise the Word wouldn't exist. And it's attributed to Jesus. So if somebody else was responsible for the brilliance of the Word, why didn't they take credit for it? It's like a work of Shakespeare, When you read this work, you're like, wow, this is a genius work, Macbeth. And it says it's written by Shakespeare. Well, there's an excellent chance Shakespeare actually existed, and it was written by Shakespeare, because how else would that genius work exist? Unless there really was a singular genius who lived and created it. And it says it was Shakespeare, so if somebody else created it, why didn't they put their name on it? So the implication is it was in fact done by Shakespeare, and Shakespeare did in fact exist. So we have the Word, which proves Jesus existed. It also proves Jesus was an unparalleled genius, and if anybody was going to be God, he would have been the author of the Word. So that's a lot of evidence there that Jesus is God, is who he says he was. Why is he getting us? Doesn't have anything like the Word. Nothing. So what has he got? He's got zip. Nothing. Jesus also was resurrected from the dead. Well, that's not possible under our laws of physics. How is that possible? It can't happen. Well, he did it. Well, the only person who could do that is God, because God can change the laws of physics anytime he wants. So, this proves that Jesus was God. This proves, because if you see somebody rise from the dead, the impossible has just been done in front of you, which means God must have done it, and everything that person told you has got to be true, because God resurrected this person. So if you see somebody who's resurrected, man, you're going to believe everything they say. And that's the case with Jesus. Now, true, there's no way to directly prove that Jesus was resurrected, because it happened 2,000 years ago, and there was no videotapes of it or other forensic evidence that it occurred. There is some argument about the Shroud of Turin being, forensic evidence of Jesus' resurrection. But the Shroud of Turin's got issues with carbon dating. So I know you can't directly prove this, but something special happened 2,000 years ago, and there were certainly eyewitnesses who said it happened. So you do have some evidence that, in fact, it did happen. Flying spaghetti monster? Resurrection? Doesn't have anything like that. There's no evidence that flying spaghetti monster is like Jesus or is God. So what has he got? Again, he's got zip. So Jesus also has miracles. Miracles are things that are impossible under the laws of physics, unless God intervenes and changes those laws of physics in a certain circumstance or around a certain thing or person to allow that to happen. And the Gospels tell us about the miracles that Jesus performed, including the raising of Lazarus from death, and the turning of water into wine, and the feeding of the thousands with the multiplication of loaves and fishes. And there are other miracles, healing miracles. These things couldn't happen unless God was doing them for Jesus. That's evidence that Jesus is who he says he is. And he says he's God. Now, again, of course, the miracles are set forth in the Gospels, and that's a book. I don't have direct evidence of those miracles. There's no videotapes. There's no forensic evidence of those miracles. There's just eyewitness testimony recorded in the Gospels that they happened. So it's evidence. It's not best evidence you could possibly have. But and plus it happened 2,000 years ago. But something very special happened 2,000 years ago because Jesus' church is still here after 2,000 years. Something special must have happened for it still to be here. What does a flying spaghetti monster have? Miracles? No. Zip. So, flying spaghetti monster, he adds up to a big 0. Whereas Jesus has a lot of evidence that he is who he says he is. In fact, he's the best bet for being the Son of God. Exactly who he said he was. He's the best bet of any religious figure in world history for actually telling us the truth. The truth, the actual truth. And I've done a video on Jesus as well. You can watch that. So, as you can see, Jesus is the best candidate, has evidence. Why Skinny Monster has no evidence? Why even bother worrying about him? There's no evidence. Why even believe in it? But then again, he is a joke. So, and he knows he's a joke. If you ever hear about the flying spaghetti monster, that's what the deal is with the flying spaghetti monster. And the truth is, it's a false argument. And it's because its followers really don't understand who Jesus and God really is and how the flying spaghetti monster differs from that greatly. So please, don't be persuaded by the flying spaghetti monster or convinced by this sort of argument, because it's got flaws in it, big holes. But it's funny to some extent. It's not funny if you believe it, but it's a character. It's satire. All right. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Maybe I'll address them in a future video or in the comments below. Please press the subscribe button. I appreciate it. And don't get fooled by that flying spaghetti monster, people. Take care.